Reason, a straightforward introduction. This video is about reason, also known as sound reasoning, rationality, or just effective thinking. I'll characterize this kind of thinking, talk briefly about how it's developed and how individuals can get better at it, and then finish with some specific issues that often give rise to confusion or concerns. I hope you find this interesting, enjoyable, and useful. It's something to throw back at people who argue that reason is not a good thing. They may be academics making a living by arguing that everything is relative, or perhaps people who find your reason and sense of fairness is stopping them getting what they want. I hope you find in this presentation the counter-arguments you need in those frustrating moments. Let's begin by characterizing reason. By reason, I mean the type of thinking that works best in objective tests of thinking effectiveness. Reason is not a system based on arbitrary choices of axiom or cultural prejudices. The truth is not a matter of opinion. Reason is the thinking that really works. This definition is simple in principle, and if you accept that effective thinking sounds like a good thing, then you should prefer the methods that prove to be effective. Of course, not every attempt to use reason is successful, and sometimes a lucky guess can be correct, but over a long series of objective tests, it is reason that will almost always win. There is also one task where unsound thinking can perform quite well, and that is the task of persuading someone to accept a belief that is wrong, or go along with a course of action that's a poor one. In this task, a person who does not use reason might convince themselves of something and have similar success at convincing other people. With these minor qualifications, the ultimate test of reason is that it works. Reason works to understand and sometimes to influence or even control systems that cannot be charmed or bargained with or pleaded with. It's the thinking that can understand complex natural systems, cure diseases, raise agricultural productivity, understand people, win most computer games, work in sport, organize complicated human activities efficiently, make an aeroplane fly, and so much more. It is reason that has brought scientific understanding and advanced technologies that have given life to billions of people who otherwise would have died early or never been born at all. It also helps each of us individually to be happier, contribute more, live longer, and alleviate stress, anxiety, and low mood. The main elements of reason are a firm basis in reality, i.e. being factual, and logic. However, these can be expanded upon. Efficient observation. The foundation is meticulous observation, that is, noticing specific factual details objectively. Counting, timing, other measurement, and recording. This may be just passive observation, but is usually more effective in exploratory trials, tests, and experiments. Sound reasoners have a good understanding of ways that observations can be unreliable, and design their observation methods to minimize those problems. Orderly representation. With observations recorded, it is helpful to summarize them in ways that promote understanding. This can be with charts and other visual summaries, including animations, tables, breakdowns, summary statistics, and mathematical models that fit the data. Orderly representation does not stop there. Possible explanations and other elements of thinking can also be represented in neat, orderly, precise ways. Sound reasoners use clear, precise language to say only what they intend to say. They use terms consistently and recognize when distinctions need to be made. Their thinking is orderly and methodical. They document it and use explicit models, sometimes including mathematical models and simulations. Logic. Sound reasoning is consistent with conventional propositional and predicate logic and with conventional mathematics, but not restricted to situations where there's complete certainty. It is also consistent with the Bayesian meaning of probability as degree of belief and with probability theory. Facts and possible explanations are compared with each other. Deductions from alternative models, that is, explanations, are made and compared with what has been observed or could be observed to consider how likely it is that each model is the best. Controlled, accurate doubt. Sound reasoning requires considering multiple possibilities carefully, not just jumping to conclusions. Evidence accumulates, models are refined and combined, and yet there can still be doubt as to which is best, and new evidence can prompt quite deep revisions. To reason well, it's important to minimize the extent to which you are confident of beliefs that are in fact wrong. This means avoiding certainty about points on which there is little or no evidence. This premature certainty might distort observations and thinking. A lifetime of careful, sound reasoning is important as a basis for continued sound reasoning. A sound reasoner also checks facts as part of a responsible approach to mental quality assurance. Sound reasoners understand statistical effects, psychological biases and delusions, and typical errors. They usually have a particularly strong understanding of the reasoning errors that are common in their particular areas of expertise and work to avoid or overcome them. Taking this further, a sound reasoner is aware of the many ways that others might go wrong in their reasoning or attempt persuasive tricks, and takes precautions against them. Efficient design. Developing new technologies also involves design work, and this is best done in an orderly, focused way, exploring the best alternatives first, driven by insight, unimpeded by habit, combining good ideas, and testing ideas against knowledge and using practical tests. Now let's think about how reason has developed. Although reason is now a recognizable approach with familiar elements, it has developed over centuries and is still being refined and improved. Highlights include Aristotle's work on logic and Euclid's work on geometry. Breakthroughs in probability theory that begin over 300 years ago continue to push forward as new computational methods make modern Bayesian methods practical. Artificial intelligence programs running on fast modern computers have also made dramatic improvements in productivity, but they built on a foundation of increasingly abstract and efficient symbolic notations developed before computers. Early mathematicians wrote equations in Latin, but today we use the familiar notation of letters for variables and special characters for operators, comparators, and a range of functions. This has greatly increased the productivity of manual mathematics, but software has taken this further, with systems able to perform symbolic reasoning in calculus, for example, as well as crunch numbers. In the 20th century, great progress was made in understanding the cost of thinking and the idea of bounded rationality. Far more people today are interested in developing systematic ways to think about problems, especially difficult ones. Psychologists have uncovered a wide range of irrational behaviors, including biases and thinking mistakes, that good reasoners can learn about and defend against. Experimental methods and research methods generally have developed, and some of these are improvements over past methods, at least in some situations. The frontiers of reason for humans have been pushed forward, and the same is true for particular groups of people and for individuals. Countries can make progress, usually by absorbing and applying discoveries made by others. Individuals can make progress if they make an effort. Sound reasoning involves many skills. Use of some of these has been correlated with IQ test scores and/or with numeracy skills, but not all. If you are thinking about using sound reasoning more in your life, then the main determinant of how far you can go is your own determination to learn and to act differently. Opportunities to learn are available to just about everyone, at least in the developed, largely secular world. All you need is a public library or an internet connection. And now, finally, some potential confusions and concerns. The following points cover potential sources of confusion or concern about this idea of reason. Other names. Synonyms for reason include sound reasoning, rational thinking, logical thinking, effective thinking, and some other permutations of these words. Philosophers and psychologists have written in detail about phrases like these, and no doubt fine distinctions have been drawn. In this presentation, there are no such distinctions. Reason versus science. Much of this probably sounds a lot like science, but it is not quite the same. Good science makes intensive use of sound reasoning, but 1. Not all work presented as science is entirely done with sound reasoning, and 2. A lot of sound reasoning is done outside science. For example, imagine that two people open a small sandwich shop, but find that at lunchtimes, when they're busy, work is stressful and chaotic. In the evening, they talk over what happens, carefully itemizing the specific issues they can remember, writing them in practical terms, and then consider possible reasons for those problems and possible remedies. As a result of this, they make some changes to the layout of their shop, slightly change who does what, and prepare ingredients differently the next day. Subsequently, as they work, they are much more aware of issues and try to evaluate the functioning of the shop as objectively as they can, continuing to tweak their approach day after day. This is not what most people would recognize as science, but it is sound reasoning. They did not do all the things that are typical of sound reasoning, but they did enough to make good progress. It could have been much worse. They could have tried to work out their process, shop layout, menu, and so on, from some kind of mystical principles, ignoring the evidence of their own observations and trusting in vibrations or a supernatural being to bring them success. Reason and emotion. Reason is not an alternative to emotion. Our emotional responses are to situations as we understand them. Sound reasoning allows us to understand situations correctly and so react with appropriate emotions to the right things and to the right extent. Also, using reason does not mean ignoring emotion in favor of more easily measured outcomes like money or time. Depending on your interpretation of fairness, the emotional consequences of a course of action could be important considerations. In some situations, they might even be measurable and quantifiable. Rationality and selfishness. Some people associate the word rationality with selfishness or money orientation, perhaps as a ploy to discredit rationality, but no such associations are intended here. I'm just talking about logical, effective thinking. Boundedness. This idea of sound reasoning also recognizes that rationality is bounded in the sense that most real problems are too complex and involve too much uncertainty for conclusions to be drawn without simplifications and taking uncertainty into account in some way. Competitive advocacy. Discussions based on reason should feel like cooperative analysis or problem solving, though they might be quite one-sided if one person has done a lot more thinking on a problem than others. This does not mean that people are unwilling to find fault. It just means they are as determined to find faults in their own reasoning as in the reasoning of others. In some situations, our society relies on competitive advocacy, though with some rules applied to reduce the worst behaviour. Competitive advocacy is the idea behind courtroom procedures, some scientific publications and conferences, some election debates, debates in Parliament and debates elsewhere. Competitive advocacy is a way to control or contain bad behaviour and is very different from cooperative thinking. It is a potential fallback approach if cooperative thinking cannot be achieved. Creativity. Reason is not restricted to deduction, as the descriptions of typical mental activities earlier made clear. The ability to solve problems, to design, and to come up with unexpected, fresh solutions is a crucial part of reason. What we call intuition is not a mystical, unconscious process that somehow operates outside the realm of reason. More often, it is the result of pattern recognition and response, or of very simple reasoning that does not need to be put into symbols. Intuition can be developed by acquiring more skill through reason. Speed. Being an effective thinker involves learning to make progress quickly and efficiently, not just by sticking to rules of deductive logic. In practice, unless thinking is carried out by an electronic computer, we usually need lines of reasoning to be short and simple, or we get confused and make mistakes. Mathematical reasoning is a remarkable exception to this, but even with mathematics, there are some arguments that are just too long to be checked reliably by humans. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for listening and watch out for more in future, but please be patient. I don't do these every day. Maybe best to subscribe.